Wally.
I would call to order the Village of Westmont Planning and Zoning Commission for its February 13th meeting. May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Pill.
Here.
Commissioner Thomas.
Here.
Commissioner Fleet.
Here.
Commissioner Fidesco.
Here.
Did I miss anybody? Did I say Commissioner Anton?
Here.
Commissioner Van Buren is here, and Chairman Richard.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, if you would please all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Anybody has to be sworn in, please raise your right hand. Ladies, I swear that any testimony I give this evening shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
I do.
Under pain of death. Okay.
Double deal.
I would ask that we silence all electronic devices. And first order of business is our December 12th, 2012 minutes. May I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Motion to adopt by Commissioner Anton, seconded by Commissioner Fleet. Question on the motion. Roll call, please.
Mr. Thomas.
Yes.
Commissioner Fleet.
Yes.
Commissioner Fidesco.
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes. Commissioner Anton.
Abstain.
And Commissioner Pill.
Yes.
And Chairman Richard.
Yes. Okay, the December minutes are hereby approved as printed. Secondly, now, we have our January 9th, 2013 minutes. May we have a motion, please?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Pill and seconded by Commissioner Anton. Question on the motion?
Mr. Chairman, I was not here I was not present at that meeting. My name is listed on roll call as being present.
Are we talking January 9th?
Excuse me, January 9th, yes.
All right.
I could have sworn I saw him here.
Then we will have to,
We'll amend those.
Make sure he doesn't get paid. You'll get paid.
Commissioner Pill, would you like to amend the
Yes,
motion to correct?
absolutely. We'll amend that to reflect that Commissioner Fleet was not here at the time.
Second.
Okay. We've had a motion and a second. Further questions? A roll call, please.
Commissioner Fleet.
Abstain.
Commissioner Fidesco.
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes. Commissioner Anton.
Yes.
Commissioner Pill.
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
And Chairman Richard.
Yes. Okay. Next item of business, new business, planning and zoning item 13-003, a workshop discussion pertaining to amendments to the Village of Westmont sign ordinance, Appendix A, Article 11-signs. Good evening, staff.
Good evening. Next month, we'll be back to a full agenda with several big cases, so we thought that this would be an opportune time to bring up potential sign text amendments. It's been a while since the code was updated, and the comprehensive plan has some great suggestions which we can incorporate. We included a table that compares other local towns to Westmont, including sign size, height, and stances on pole signs, ground sign landscaping, and box signs. To guide the discussion, we have a selection of photos to display, and feel free to comment as I'm moving through the slides. You can follow along with the photos that are included at the dais too. The first slide shows different ways that tobacco stores have chosen to put up their signs to display their wares. As you can tell with the hookah house, this was an illegal sign installation which they were told to remove, and they now have a conforming sign back up. And we also have the smoke exchange and then a Cigar King wall sign shown on the brick. The next style of sign.
I noticed you didn't include the tobacco house at the south end, 6200 on Cass.
That's true. It's a similar.
Okay.
It's a non-illuminated sign.
Okay.
The next style of signs are panel box signs. These are internally illuminated so that the back of the panel shows through, and the entire box section is illuminated. So the cake in a box sign to the left, that would have a bright white background, and so would the other two signs. Next, we have a more unique style of a box sign. These are cut out to showcase the store's individual logo. So they're still a box sign, but they have black and dark backgrounds, so it's a little bit less bright in the evening. So when you see these, the amber on the right, only the amber text and their circular logo will shine through. These are some different style, like a banner and flat panel style sign. As you can see in the bottom, the African hair braiding, they've got a sign that doesn't look very durable, and it's a little bit less permanent. Moondragon has a similar style in terms of being flat, but it's a more durable panel that also matches the awnings that they've used in front of their entrance. Next, we have externally illuminated signs. Most of these signs have cutout backgrounds. They don't have light that shines through. Instead, they have gooseneck fixtures, which illuminate from a little bit of a distance. That way, you can incorporate both the name of the business and incorporate logos. A very typical sign that you'll see in shopping centers are channel letter signs. You can see that the Center for Dance on North Cass did a very unique style. They put a sign background so that way the light will kind of pop from the back, and then they also have a character that's externally illuminated. On the left, you'll see a bunch of different, they're all channel letter signs, but they all incorporate different logos, colors, and sizes. As you can see, the shopping center seems to have a pretty uniform size restriction, so that way the architecture isn't covered up.
This looks like Appleton.
These are some similar channel letter signs, again, with different styles and colors, similar sizes, and then the bottom channel letter signs are from downtown Arlington Heights, which renovated in the past decade, and they require both awnings and signs to identify their business. Sometimes
You say this was, what city was this?
the bottom,
It looks like Appleton.
oh, that one's ours.
The bottom one on the channel letter signs. Curious, it looks like looking right down downtown Appleton, Wisconsin.
That one's Arlington Heights.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. For the next slide, a lot of times we have small businesses that might not have a lot of money to put into signs. They don't want to get an electrical permit, or they might not want to run electricity to it because that adds to the expense of the sign. It can often add a couple $1,000s. So we have some signs that are individually attached or individually painted or pin mounted. This can decrease the cost of the sign, but it can still have a very attractive appearance on the front of the building. Some businesses choose to identify their business without a sign and instead use awnings. As you can see in the bottom left, J. Fleming's in the downtown showcases their business with their logos and the business. It's very easy to read, and it pops in the downtown on the storefront. Similar with Mott's, it's very easy to read, and they don't have a lot of room for a wall sign looking there. Next, we have electronic message signs. We see a variety of styles currently. Our code allows for the electronic message sign to be subsidiary to the main ground sign, and then it can only be 40% of the size, and it can't change or flash. So on the left, you can see a pole sign, and then on the right, you can see how it was incorporated into a monument sign. Next, we have a couple different examples of pylon signs. On the left, Fifth Third does a box sign on top of a pole, and then on the right, you've got Porsche, which incorporated their logo into a very tall monument-style sign. On the left, we have two examples of multi-tenant signs. Some towns restrict multi-tenant signs to having a one-color background, and then the individual tenants can use their own logos and colors. You can see that on the right. Walgreens uses their typical red. The apartments are done in a green. With the 60th and Cass sign, there's a lot of different competing colors going on with the backgrounds. And with that, I'll open it up to questions and comments from the commissioners.
Okay, Troy, do you want to start on this? Commissioner Fleet?
We can't hear you.
Yeah, I guess, I guess I'm trying to come up with a statement that says, almost don't know where to start.
Okay.
Signs are like art in ways, you know what you like, and you probably know what you don't like. How do you write that down? And
Okay.
how do you get to people with our diversifying community? What someone from another country, another culture may look for in a sign may not be the same things that someone who's lived in Westmont, like myself, for 30 years would look for a sign if I'm looking for a new business in Westmont.
I think I'd argue with you just for the sake of when you come into Westmont, Westmont has the ability to say this is what we want for our signage. Much as like we're having the trouble with America, everybody comes into America, they don't want to even learn to speak English. We brought our culture, we want to live in our culture, we don't want to be American. So I think I would refute that. If Westmont deems that they want a certain type of sign, if you want to come here, adhere to their rules or don't come here. Yes, Shannon.
Maybe I could present just a couple of framing comments
Please.
to help guide the discussion along. The first thing I wanted to say, per First Amendment rights, signage has to be content neutral. So villages can restrict the form of signage in terms of area, size, but not the message. So I want to make sure we're all on the same page as far as that's concerned. In the staff report, there were a couple of suggestions that were made based on what we're seeing in the draft comprehensive plan that we thought we could start with to just, kind of kick the conversation off. So page 2 of your staff report, there's 2 groups of bullet point items, and I'm looking at the second one here. So as we presented the photographs of various signs from our community and outside of our community, a few things that we would like to recommend the consideration of is prohibiting vinyl banner signs as permanent signs. You saw an example in our packet there. Allowing a ground sign in addition to a wall sign for interior non-corner lots if a masonry monument style sign is used. We've we've had a lot of requests for variance, which Jill did a great job of summarizing in the report. And oftentimes we have, essentially the code views interior lots differently than corner lots. On corner lots, you can do 2 signs, and on interior lots, you can only do 1. We've found that there might be some room for a trade-off. If we could get a better quality sign in the monument style, we may be willing to consider allowing a second sign, because we've pretty routinely approved variances of that type of request. And the third recommendation was to consider prohibiting the wall box signs in the central business district. We found in the table that the height of our ground signs is quite high in comparison to surrounding communities, especially the exception we allow for Ogden Avenue to go up to 30 feet. Some of our neighboring communities allow from 5 to 12 feet for their ground signs. And another recommendation, which we've had a great deal of success encouraging people to do but would really like to codify, is requiring landscaping at the base of monument signs. It provides a very nice amenity, something that's attractive. So the thing that's kind of running in the background of these suggestions would be the fact that we're on the eve of adoption of the comprehensive plan. The village board is considering the draft tomorrow evening, and we may have approval as early as Tuesday night. And it was thought that once that plan is adopted, village staff is going to be making recommendations and reviewing plans that are to make sure they're consistent with the long-range vision and goals. And this was sort of a way to kind of have a precursor conversation in a workshop form to assess the commission's comfort level in doing some of these things to kind of kickstart the aesthetic conversation. So I know that was a lot, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'm sure Jill is as well, but I thought that might be helpful to put that on the table.
Let's have a freewheeling discussion. If you feel like asking a question, please, just ask.
I would just have a comment. And overall on our comparison here, we're not too far off from what our neighbors are, with the exception of that 30-foot sign. We all are in a max foot for wall signs. We're not real far apart from most of our neighbors on that. It doesn't appear to be we're really that far off right now as we start.
It seems that in terms of area, we're pretty much in line. It's more the types of signage. So that box style sign, and then the height of the ground signs. And the pole sign question, I think, as well.
The other thing is that a lot of the signs, or a lot of the towns allow 1 wall sign per street frontage and 1 ground sign per street frontage. So in that case, we're more restrictive, like Shannon said, with the 1 sign per interior lots. And then another thing that I noticed is that most communities max out the amount you can get. Like right now, if we had a 400-foot length building, you could do 800 square feet of signs.
Yeah.
So
they go up to either 250 or 500 feet. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I would ask is that after you approve a sign and somebody comes along with an awning and like Sundays and shakes and it's on the awning, do we allow that?
Technically, any of the lettering on an awning, the way the code is written today,
is a
counts
sign
towards the total square footage as a sign. The only kind of lettering exclusion that wouldn't trigger a request for permit or contribute to the square footage would be like window lettering.
Okay.
Is that something you'd like us to look at more closely?
No.
Or?
No, I was just wondering whether that was counted.
Okay.
And apparently it is. Okay.
Shannon?
Yes, sir.
If I might ask, on the multi-tenant signs then, you're asking for a specific background color. Now, would that be village-wide? And who would we codify that color by adopting a certain color? Or how do you propose to do that if
I don't know that we are making a recommendation in terms of going down that path at this point, but that was just included as an example to kind of show, maybe if there's a planned development or something, you might want to talk about that as a condition, just so that there's some uniformity in terms of all of the site details. But I think that was included just to kind of illustrate what some other communities are doing as a control mechanism.
Well, then,
I'd like to suggest
Would
that we go with a single background type sign, however, not limited for the entire community,
Just for-
but by that particular shopping center or building, because that's one of the ugliest type of signs we have, and you see them all over the place in town, and it really is poor because you can't figure it out. I mean, you know, there's so many different colors, and your eye is drawn to one particular color, and somebody else's is to another, and it's really difficult to figure out who's in there, and then it's just ugly.
And sometimes it has to do with their identity and logos, too.
Yeah,
This one,
and
I
so
don't-
they'd still have the freedom under this scenario to use the colors that were part of their branding, their corporate image, so long as the
On this particular one, though, it's all over the place, and yet
Yes.
there's not a identifying, now, if you, Walgreens, you see a Walgreens sign immediately, you know.
Right.
Westmont, you immediately see that.
Yeah, as far as the type of letters or maybe the style, that can change. However, there should be uniformity within the sign to the point that, you know, maybe it's one color background and the colors, as far as the color of letters, should be consistent. If it's blue, it's blue. If it's green, it's green.
But what happens when you have a certain color or a certain background is part of your logo?
They can have that.
That's how the people find the,
On their particular portion of the building, they'll have their sign. On the common sign, which is more of a directional sign, you know, for people driving down the road,
if I was, I'd have a problem with that if I was
Burger King.
the tenant, some Burger King or,
Well, generally, the developers will pick a very neutral background. Like, you might be able to put, letters onto a masonry base or have like ivory or black, something that makes the sign stand out. And then the individual tenants are able to use their colors on the letters, but then they don't need a background because then it just pops off. But you don't want to restrict.
I guess I
This is
wouldn't
not the
mind
first
that,
time
but
the
it
developers
has to be
have ran
something
into
common in the background.
no, I agree with you.
multi-tenants, and everybody has their own thing, they've worked it out before.
Looks like a business card sales ad. Have you ever seen those? You know, you go to a restaurant and you flip over the little placemat and you'll see like 15 different business cards and they're all different colors. That's kind of what this looks like.
And I think the example that Jill included that's outside of the village shows what that would look like, because some of the businesses just happen to have the same color, but the apartment community at the very bottom is using a different color, and it still shows, or is a very uniform development or sign. I'm on multi-tenant signs, the last page of the packet. So it still reads as a uniform sign, even though it allows the multiple colors, because it has that background that ties everything together.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Burkdale Village?
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's attractive. You have different
fine.
color lettering, but it's tied together. The oneness is in the frame and background color.
Right, you don't want to get too restrictive with letter coloring because then you get into the McDonald's and Walgreens issues. I mean, they're all going to mandate that they have their own color for their letters, but the opaque background, it treats everyone the same way.
Yeah.
I would question anybody going down Cass Avenue at 60th Street trying to read this sign and see all the names on it. There is just no way you could peruse that and adequately drive safely at
That'd be worse than texting.
just about. I agree with you.
They got that guy in the outfit dancing out in front.
Oh, for the income tax?
Tax guy,
He's
yeah.
not allowed.
Saw
I
him
didn't
out
think
there.
that was allowed anymore, is it?
He has to be on private property, and I think our inspector just talked to him about that.
Oh, okay.
But he's on the Parkway.
He shouldn't be. We'll make a note of that.
Have to talk to Uncle Sam again.
I have a question concerning the recommendation to prohibit wall box signs in the central business district, which is bullet point number 3 of the second section. And so in looking at Jill's presentation of box signs with incorporated logo, specifically Karma and Amber, I find both of those signs very attractive, and I like the look of them. So those two would both be eliminated, huh?
It's actually something we discussed today, because really the panel style signs are the ones that staff is making a recommendation against. While technically those may be box style, we may be able to build some language in that if they're, kind of die cut or cut around a logo, a brand logo, that we could still work within that, because those signs do come off as attractive. They're not just a panel, that you slide into a basic box.
And then what do you do with this? Do you like grandfather then for people who are in already? Like, the top 3 are, although I don't know if that Cake in the Box is still in business.
They just closed.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. Yeah, they would be grandfathered if they're in existence, and then new tenants would
I see.
Their type sign.
So we could still, Artistic Grooming 2 could keep that sign?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we wouldn't make everyone take their signs.
That's where my dog goes.
Oh, well, then we definitely want to get them.
So, yeah, as part of
Exactly.
the proposal, there wouldn't be any sort of amortization schedule where we'd require compliance. It would only be upon a change in tenant or a change in the sign itself.
But I would not personally support the elimination of signs that look to be or are similar to Karma or Amber's.
Sure.
Right.
I think
Yeah,
those
I
are
agree as well.
tastefully done.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think they provide a certain ambiance to the downtown area. And I think those that kind of stuff should be encouraged, actually. I guess in a brief summary, in reviewing this, I sort of felt a little bit like Roy did starting out, that I didn't know, where exactly we would comment on this, because as a business owner, I think that business has a right to identify themselves so that they can, they're in business to be in business, and they have to let the public know what they're doing. I've been siding with most businesses who have come before us as long as it's been reasonable, and I think we should still continue that. I do think there's a huge difference between the panel box sign pictures and the box signs with incorporated logos, and I understand that. I'm not sure that our presentation, and maybe you were just getting feedback to take it to the next step, because I'm not sure that, I'm not sure how to create that next step, because it's not my field of expertise. So I was a little uncomfortable making recommendations because I don't know what they should be, really.
And I think that was a big part of the discussion. We'd like to get your feedback to see, if you think that staff's recommendations are appropriate, if they're not appropriate, if there's something else that you'd rather see, and then we can try to craft the text and come back with you.
Well, I love the landscaping. I think 30 feet's too high. The ball box signs, if they're panel box signs, I don't like those in the future. The box signs with incorporated logo, I said the landscaping was good. The box signs with incorporated logo are good. Allowing a ground sign in addition to the wall sign, I would be in favor of that, and prohibiting vinyl banners as permanent signs, I think long-term that's the best way to go. I also think that the example that we talked about before with the multiple signs that you see typically in a strip mall, every person who's in there thinks that that's going to be the savior, is to get their name up on that thing. It's like a competitive thing. Sign the lease, and the faster you can get my name up there, the faster people are going to flock to my door. Well, that's not always really the case. You're also limited by the size and scope of the sign. So if you have 12 people in a strip mall, each going to want a small part of a sign, do we then say, well, this doesn't look good, but maybe the guy should have a bigger one? Well, then, that creates a problem in a different area. I'm not sure I see the solution, but what I can tell you from a personal standpoint is that the examples we have are ugly, just like everybody else said, and I don't like them. I'm not sure what the alternative is other than taking those away, and I'm not sure that that's the right thing either to do. If you're the guy who owns a strip mall and are trying to rent this to 6 or 12 tenants, you got to be able to offer that. It's almost like having water and electricity these days.
Well, with the current sign that we have, that we had as an example, maybe as they change tenants, we suggest that they go with one color background, and, okay, the colors of the letters can change, the type of letters can change, the style. However, they need to start going with a common background, because if you changed all of those signs, you know, there's 8 there right now, if you changed them all to one color background, whether it's white or yellow or whatever it is, you know, it would be more uniform, and, you know, you're not outlining their sign.
But on the other hand, if you make them all the same background, I think you're going to have a very difficult time distinguishing
Right,
between
you
the
got to
8 of them.
delineate one business from the other.
I think that's what this
That
does.
does it, but it's ugly.
You're able to count that there's 8 of them quickly, but if you make all of those a tan or beige or a white background, it's going to be much harder, I think, to tell the difference. I don't know. And I'm telling you, I agree with you. I think that's ugly. I don't know what the solution is on that.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I wanted to go to the landscaping, just make a comment. The pole signs that we have, going forward, I mean, I have a suggestion, and I don't know how, okay, there's 2 ways to do landscaping. If it's at grade, you can put bushes around the poles, or you can have an alternative where maybe they'll put in a masonry type structure, a box per se, and then have within that perennials or some sort of shrubs, some small shrubs or something that will hide the sign from just going into the ground. And that's one of my suggestions. And I agree about the vinyl signs as far as being permanent. They are ugly. We have a temporary sign ordinance that says they can only stay up for a certain period of time. And if they do have a temporary permit because their regular sign's not in, there should be a limit on that as well before it becomes a permanent sign. You know, that's another way of regulating it.
We've also had businesses that have come in here and occupied, a bank, for example, came in and occupied a space temporarily and had to have signage until they got their other structure done. So those things, you know, that's where temporaries are really helpful. I can recall that we've come a long ways on signage, believe me. There was a time when all our meetings were devoted, almost all to signage, and almost everything was 300% to 400% over. We stuck to the guns. We had Burger King, which is now the Slammers, or what's the?
Cockhead.
Yeah, over there, and we restricted them so much on signage. You know what they finally just did? They put up an American flag that's so big, just in retaliation, to say, here we are.
Love Americans.
You know? But, we may not be the best on signage. I'm sure we can do a lot to improve it, but we're not too bad either.
I'll tell you one thing I like on this. We go back to this Birkdale Village Walgreens sign. They've got an address on it. Mm-hmm. How many times I've gone up and down these streets trying to see an address as to where in the world I'm at.
I often think that too, because when you look at the 60th and Cass pylon sign, I'd be looking for an address rather than trying to find, 2-point font in,
Well, Pasquinelli, you can't find anything back there.
right?
No,
And I'm driving over lawns and fences and stuff, so I had to find a sign.
you're the guy that made those tricks. So,
As far as electronic signs, how are we doing? When we first came up with that, we were, some members of the commission were afraid of, Vegas, eventually everything going there, and you're going to have the next generation of signs, and you see them along the interstates now. They're electronic and they change and everything. And how are you having problems with people that have those signs? Are they allowed to change?
They are allowed to change. They can transition. They're supposed to be alphanumeric. no sort of fancy transitions. So we've had a few, actually, we had a few that were the original ones that went up before the ordinance went
Right,
into
and that
place.
precipitated the, yeah.
Yes, precisely. And so we've had to talk with people and explain, here's the requirements for using your sign within the parameters. A few have been a little bit too bright and it's been distracting to drivers, so we've worked with the owners to the controls to adjust those. And generally speaking, the requirements that were put into place to kind of get ahead of this have been successful. I think that the business community
Right,
likes
and
the
there aren't that
flexibility.
many either.
Yeah.
Another thing is they couldn't have colors that could be thought that this is a traffic light. You couldn't have those colors that would normally be used for traffic regulation, red, green, and yellow.
When I've talked to sign contractors about the electronic signs, they always say that the text amendment is very easy to read, too. So they understand, how to do the size, how to, stop it after a minute, how to do alphanumeric. So it makes sense to them. So it's been well received.
And there will always be those examples that, the technology changes, we get that first person that wants to kind of come and present their case, and that's what this commission is here for, to kind of hear that out and help the village craft what we'll do in the long range to address the concerns.
So tonight, what would you like from us tonight? Would you like to take some specific recommendations away from this that would be that we would have a concurrence on?
Well, I'm feeling the general consensus was that the staff recommendations were okay. I also hear that it seems that there was some consensus on trying to have a unifying color for the monument or multi-tenant signs for the most part. That seems to be the feedback.
We just don't know how you're going to get there.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. And again, it wouldn't be about staff or the commission saying this is the color you have to use. I think it lends itself to what the development looks like, what they're trying to bring together to unify the project. So I think the next steps are probably going to be taking the majority opinion from this discussion tonight and then bringing it to the Building and Zoning Committee of the Village Board to kind of hash out and then come back with some actual proposed language to sink our teeth into.
Sounds good.
If I may, Shannon, right now, the line that shows Westmont then, this is what we allow, what we have
The
down
table?
there?
Yes,
Table?
yes.
Okay, we allow 32-foot adjacent to Ogden?
We sure
And
do.
83,
We sure do,
but the rest of our maximum height ground sign is 20 feet?
yes. And even the 20 is very high compared to the other communities that were surveyed.
Yeah.
That's something that maybe we could spend a few more minutes on.
Now, the Porsche is
Was that 30?
I believe it's 30.
30 feet, yeah, that looked,
I really don't have a problem with that portion. Although it's gigantic, that particular sign looks good. Now, the next one, who knows what the design is going to be, and a gorilla or whatever, but I'm saying that particular sign I'm all right with, but
Isn't there
once you
one
give a
immediate-
footage,
Excuse me.
you're kind of locked in,
Maybe you reduce it to 12 and you got it above 12, you've got to come before us for a special use. But you don't want to preclude the dealerships from having those signs.
It
Right.
seems like some of the,
You don't want me putting up a sign that says, Stan's Excellent Water Ski Shop, you don't need that.
Is there another one in Ogden immediately west of Cass Avenue on the north side of the street? Isn't there a big, or there used to be if there's not right now?
Well, there's the Mercury sign, right?
Yeah, before you get there.
Lincoln Mercury.
It's right about where the Gold Place or somewhere on there, there's a real tall one? Or has that
Or
been taken
maybe, I'm
down?
not picturing it.
Because that's the one immediately came to mind when you said the 30-foot.
billboard there.
Yeah, it's a big billboard.
that's not incorporated.
Yes,
Unincorporated.
That's an
Well, yeah, we cannot regulate.
it's county, it's under county
Okay.
jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that would probably be allowed, though, right?
The-
In terms of size?
The height?
Yeah.
If that's 30 feet, that would be a comparable.
What do you think, John?
We covered the First Amendment part of the conversation.
Per hour.
Hey, Greg? You talked about the height of the ground sign. What did you talk about, 20 feet? You think Stan's idea about perhaps maybe 15 foot, and then you'd have to come in for a special use or something?
You know, again, it's different. You have a multi-tenant sign like that, and I don't care if it's at 10 feet, it's going to look ugly. You get the Porsche sign at 30 feet, it looks gorgeous, and it fits in right there with the building and the architecture.
Yeah.
It's like designed as a package, and it looks great.
The Porsche sign was probably 50.
And how many tall signs do we have?
Yeah.
Probably not that many.
Well, the
Oh,
new
yeah, those are-
Walgreens
how do you
one
do
was
that? I mean-
relatively high.
Yeah.
I feel like they went over the 20 feet.
Do you?
Yeah, that's the minimum, or the base.
Yeah.
They're there, they just kind of blend into the fabric because we're used to them until they change it.
You know, with regard to answering your question, Wally, Ed, you do have a situation where if you make it too restrictive, we're going to have a parade in here, and that's
Exactly,
what we don't want to do. And if you don't make it restrictive enough, then you're going to end up with ugly signs that are way too big. So,
I think you got to reduce the height,
Yeah.
and then come back with special use for the guys. You know, you only have how many dealerships, and they remodel every 5 years, 10 years. They might have to come in here and we say, yeah, okay, look at a nice sign that's been designed, and that's not a big deal.
Well, and the good news is many of them have addressed it recently. They've been before this group for variances because many additions and remodels have taken place in the
We're going to
last
see
couple
that.
of years.
We're going to see that group back in front of us very shortly if they change their signs, because a number of those are owned by AutoNation. They're rebranding nationwide to AutoNation. They're not going to have their local names anymore. They're still going to be like, I think it's BMW.
Mercedes
and
is AutoNation.
Yeah, Mercedes. They're still going to, but they're not going to call it
Laurel Motors,
Laurel Motors or whatever. It's going to be
AutoNation.
AutoNation. So they may be in here, if they change their signs size, then they'll have to come back. But otherwise, if they do it in place.
Isn't the height proportional to speed limit also? It seems that the faster the speed limit is, the higher the sign allowed, because you're going to be moving past it quicker.
I think, Jill, correct me if you feel differently, but I think the font size has a lot to do with that too. Like, for example, the one that we've been talking about that everyone feels is good, even though it's tall, it's kind of small, you know, but it's the branding and the way that it's designed, and it seems like it's part of the development. So I think it's a mixture of all of those components. And what, you know, we may feel locally is probably entirely different from what the sign industry might say in terms of the size of the signage and the lettering.
And along Route 83, there's a lot of natural landscaping along there, and I think a lot of the, like the hotel and some of the other businesses were trying to be above that so that people could see them along 83.
Sure.
So it makes more sense along 83 than it does along.
Yeah, it's also a 55-mile-an-hour speed zone.
A grade change, yeah.
So-
You don't want to spawn a whole bunch of these towers, you know, though, that come in and put up huge billboards everywhere.
Well, a good case in point is Top Hat Grill. As you go south on the Cass, the tree in the parkway blocks their sign off.
Yeah.
So you really don't know. But I wouldn't have trouble, I'm going to use this 60th and Cass pole sign as an example that I, for one, think it would be to our advantage, or to everybody's advantage, to have a common background color. And then they can put any kind of a colored sign lettering on top of that, if it were to be a nice off-white or a white. Because generally, when you get a multi-tenant sign like this, you don't see whatever, like a McDonald's or Burger King franchise, where they've got to adhere to the franchise logos. These are mostly all independent little stores. So we're not worried about a franchise logo.
Jackson Hewitt is a national chain,
Well,
but
I think if you
They don't
went
do
to
us
a
any good. They can
background
stay
and
out
then
of
you
here.
allowed the variation on the font and the color, you could still keep them to stand out so that they don't just blend into one mass of lettering.
Right. You want to allow them some design
Right, you want to
creativity.
allow them to be unique.
But
Yeah.
I strongly think one common background color would.
I think this sign too, though, is pretty tired, and it's probably had its day. So if
Yeah.
if it had a newer facade on it or redone, it would be okay. I think it's pretty beat up, and you can see it when you drive by. A lot of times, parts are falling off it. So it's an easy one to pick on, I think. But I agree too. It should be something solid, and maybe that just needs to be cleaned. I mean, I don't know.
But as Greg also alluded to, that 32-foot that we can have down at Ogden and Cass, that's fairly exorbitant, 30 feet.
It's way too high.
Far too high.
But like Porsche's, again, Porsche's is done with class. It's not, it doesn't have disco lights on it. It's a nice sign, and it fits, and I know it's elegant. And you're not always going to get that, but, we can give an okay to that. They come with a really nice design when they're going to build a new, say, I don't know, we already got Lamborghini, who, somebody else comes in here and they want to put something up and it's not good. We look at the prints and we decide we don't like it. But I still think it's just generically, we need to lower it. Everybody else is really low. Everybody else, we're the highest one on the whole page.
the next highest one is 16-foot in Woodridge.
So we'll go to 16 foot as your base, not to be crazy, or 12 to 16 feet, Shannon, and then.
That way you're still competitive, but you're
Yeah,
not
right,
totally
you're
out
not-
of scale either.
You're not the high or the low,
Right.
Be in there, and then and like I said, we'll deal with the auto dealers as they come.
What do the commissioners think about throwing out a carrot in terms of having a monument sign for inner lots, as long as it's a monument-style sign?
In the
Additional.
parking lot?
Or an additional, a ground sign,
No,
like in
no.
addition to a wall sign?
I have
I
a
don't have a
question.
problem with that.
Okay.
Yeah. I think, was it Standard Market did a good job with theirs.
Yeah.
Right.
They did a beautiful job.
Yeah, that place is perfect.
I like the idea, however, I was going to ask if it's like a strip center, or a building that has multiple tenants, we don't want to allow individual ones for them, just on say, an individual business that happens to be in the middle of a block.
Right. The code already regulates that. So for a shopping center, each tenant is allowed to have a wall sign, and then they wouldn't be
sign.
allowed to have more than one shopping center sign. So we get that request all the time for individual ground signs, and we say you have to be on the monument sign.
Yeah, as far as if it's an individual building, that makes sense to
Right.
me.
Yeah.
I'd like to throw one other question out there. In the staff report, we talked about the box signs, with the exception of the ones that are kind of die cut, like the ambers. We're going to, the village board has authorized Halcyon Levine to move forward with the second phase of their program, which is streetscape improvements. So we're going to hear from them at some point, what are some unifying characteristics that can tie the other sub-area plans together. So my question is, how does everyone feel about the box-style sign, other than the ones that we mentioned, in other business districts like 63rd and Cass, Ogden Avenue, et cetera? If you flip back through the packet, the second page. And so I know that the examples you see there are examples from downtown, but, we find these all over the community, too.
Is there anything to be said about the cost of that kind of sign versus, for example, the ones that are crafted where they have the...
Yes, it's definitely much more cost-effective. We find that oftentimes the property owner leaves that box up, and it's just a matter of switching the panel out.
I would think that I would allow it outside of the downtown business area.
Yeah, you gotta help the businesses, so you can't, I agree with you, Wally. We gotta give them a chance.
What do you think about requiring an opaque background so that the light only shines through the text and the graphics? So you don't have like the big white box?
Yeah, I know what you mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough, because it's not going to cost them any more to have it.
No,
opaque.
it doesn't.
That's to have it transparent.
Yeah, the bad part is the one that we happen to have as an example in downtown, where it's a white background, that really shines, you know,
Does.
and if we restrict that elsewhere, I think that's fine, you know, the box sign.
Any other comments from the side?
That standard market sign makes my hair stand up when I go past.
And there may be other things that we didn't think of that, you know, if you want to mention things that you've noticed.
Right, the chairman mentioned the address numerals on ground signs. We could require that. I'm sure the fire department would love that, too.
Yeah.
So
You always do
it's a good suggestion if there's anything else like that we've missed.
I had one question. It happened to be on one of these, on the channel letter signs. The example that we have here, it's the shopping center down at 63rd and Fairview, the hair garden, hair salon. Is that hair salon underneath part of the original sign, or is that something that was added in? Because I'm just wondering, if it's going to be a sign like that, it should be just one or the other. It almost looks like a box sign with the other part.
I was wondering about that, too, if it was an add-on or if it was original.
That's a good discussion, because we have had a number of signs where people have added on over time, or, you know, we've had a ground sign that had 2 poles instead of a single pylon, and people start tacking stuff up in the center. So that's, you know.
Yeah, I'd just like to prevent those kind of things. If it's the channel letter sign, it's a channel letter sign. It's not a hybrid channel letter / box sign, you know.
So they did that because, what, they didn't think the public was getting what kind of
Yeah,
store
it's-
it
What do we
was?
do here?
Yeah.
So they just threw that up?
I don't know if they threw it up or it was originally part of the sign, but it detracts from the sign. I mean, it
Right,
just,
takes away from the hair garden,
yeah.
which is what they are, allegedly.
Hair garden, maybe they just didn't have enough room to put salon after garden. Who knows?
Somebody will think that it's a saloon.
Oh, my.
Yeah, hybrid signs are kind of,
If we come back to you with text amendments, are there additional pictures or examples that you'd like to see?
Janet, a question. On that second, allowing a ground sign in addition to a wall sign for the interior non-corner
Yeah.
lot, do we allow it on corner lots now?
We
Ground
allow
sign.
2 signs on corner lots
On
by
corner lots.
right anyway.
Okay.
So they could use that style.
A ground sign and a wall? Yeah. Does anybody have any further questions?
No, not
No.
really.
Shannon, Jill, do you feel you have a consensus?
Yeah,
Or
definitely.
thoughts?
Yeah, I feel like we can put together some language. We can run it by John to see if it's legally sound, and then we can run it by all of you to see if we've met your intention.
And I think your putting this together was very helpful in having us understand what we're talking about when we say this or that kind of sign.
Okay, good.
Very good conversation.
Because we don't always know what we're talking about. Frequently.
See it.
Well, I like the comparison as to what we allow as compared to all our neighboring villages.
Yeah.
And it shows that we're pretty much ballpark with everybody else.
In the ballpark.
Doesn't get any better.
I think the only thing we were out of touch was with the height. And we'll adjust that,
Sure, great.
maybe. Anything further? Staff,
On this or in general?
in general?
In general, I just wanted to mention a couple of things about our TIF, and I know I talked about the comprehensive plan. So just, again, to reiterate, the comprehensive plan goes before the village board tomorrow at committee of the whole and may have a vote as early as Tuesday, the 19th. Also occurring on Tuesday, the 19th, is the South Westmont Business District TIF public hearing. So that's the point where the village board will hear the presentation to summarize everything from the consultant and staff, and then members of the public are invited to make comment with regard to the pending TIF district. And then recently, the board selected the date for the public hearing for the Central Business District TIF, or the downtown TIF, and May 2nd has been identified at this point for that public hearing, so.
I came to the last meeting. There hadn't been, we were notified of a date.
Yes.
Came to the meeting, and there wasn't, and it had been canceled. There was no publication or anything sent out after. We got a letter notifying us that it was on that, because I have property within the influence of the TIF.
The meeting, the notice that went out for the original public hearing date, the public hearing was opened on that date and then continued. So there was no subsequent mailing required by law
Okay.
because
By law,
of the
but it was an
continuation.
inconvenience, just
Yeah,
come here.
no, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Anything further, commissioners? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Pill, seconded by Commissioner Thomas. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.